Welcome to Live Free, Ride Free, where we talk to people who have lived self-actualized lives on their own terms and find out how they got there, what they do, how we can get there, what we can learn from them, how to live our best lives, find our own definition of success, and most importantly, find joy. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times best-selling author of The Horse Boy, founder of New Trails Learning Systems and LongRideHome.com. You can find details of all our programs and shows on rupertisaacson.com. Welcome back to Live Free, Ride Free. Today, we are going to look behind the scenes of the Hollywood movies that you've been watching over the decades where animals show up and do incredible things. And you take it for granted when you're watching because you're just into the story. But of course, there's a person, often teams of people, making sure that that process with the animals works. And that's not easy because you don't just give them a script and they follow. Terri Kuebler has spent a life in this industry in Hollywood. However, she came to a realization partway through her career that made her take it in a radically different direction. And I think if we want to define self-actualization, you'll see it with Terri's story, how that is a prime illustration. So, and it sort of starts a little bit with a lion. But Terri, before we go and meet this lion, can you just tell us a little bit who you are? And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Yes, and I'm glad the way that you're approaching that because most people want to, hear like, well, what actors did you work with and what was, what got you into that field? And my background, what got me into that field was my love of animals. I was always drawn to animals, had horses my entire life. I had moved down to the Los Angeles area and feared, that I was going to hate it. I moved down there when I met my husband and was involved in the horse racing industry because he was a harness driver. So I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do in Los Angeles. And working through a wildlife rescue, I was introduced to the industry of the Hollywood animal training. And that was a fantastic fit for being able to work with not only domestic animals, but I ended up working with a company who was a full zoo compound. It had exotics and I was able to work with wolves and bears and the big cats. And so this was a fantastic fit for me because it became about developing really strong relationships with the animals because the work required the ability to communicate non-verbally and from a distance. So I had to learn how to project safety to the animal regardless of what was going on around them. And that required a deep connection, which really spoke to who I am as a person and my desire to be around animals. In the process of this, in the middle of my career, so I was pretty much the normal mindset of, yes, I was learning how to train from the animals, and yet I was the trainer. I was the head of the hierarchy. I was, it was, you do what I want. And that was my mindset. And I tell the story sometimes of working with the eagle and I was training the eagle to fly. Like how ridiculous is that? What an ego. But that was the mindset. And so in the middle of all of this, I had a near-death experience. When I had my daughter, I had a number of aneurysms and had a near-death experience that shifted my whole perception of when I came back, really being a seeker of spiritual connection and having uh, a teacher show up. I always went with when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And so I was walking out in the woods one day and I was begging for, where's my teacher? Well, I'm ready. I'm ready. I need a teacher. I need, someone to help me connect these dots of why am I here? Why did I come back? All of it. And in the middle of that, I heard a voice, be quiet. And I was like, what? My mind just went crazy. What? I need answers. I need answers. It was like, be quiet. And as I got quiet, I realized I'm walking with a 500-pound male lion. I'm walking out in the woods with him at my side. And I look down and he kind of rolls his eyes up to me like, finally. It was just this huge aha moment of, and the voice in my head said, I'm sending you the best that I have. So this revelation of, oh, my teacher is standing right next to me. How, it was just this horrible and like, oh my gosh, I'm so slow. How could it be more obvious than a lion standing right next to me? And so, yeah, it was, it's like, talk about a board across the top of the head, it was like, how dense are you, Terri? So the journey from there was, of course, the animals that I'm blessed to be around are my spiritual gurus, my spiritual teachers. And then, being able to shift that perspective of being in awe of who they were as sentient beings and what they had to teach humanity. So shifting my entire perspective from being the teacher to being the student. And that changed everything in my work as well. It just up-leveled my ability.
Well, that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Was it then possible to get the job done of showing up on set with an animal and delivering a result with this sudden new mindset? Or did it make that like suddenly not possible?
No, it made it extremely possible in the way that now there was a bond of trust because of the respect, because of the, I'm here for you. And I'm just, because even with the horses, a question that always bothered me was, if you have a choice to do your own thing or do what I want you to do, how does that, how is that a choice that you're ever going to pick? And the answer came back of, I'm an animal who is kind of captured in your world. And so if you have the ability to set safe space for me, I want to be with you all day long, because I'm in a cage or I'm bored or I'm a horse in a stall or whatever. I want to get out and experience the world, but I want to feel safe doing it. So a bond of mutual respect was formed. And so anytime they got worried or in a new environment, they were very dependent on me of, okay, you're my safety net. You're who I feel safe around. So I'll do anything that you want and enjoy it because I feel safe.
Right. I think that this is, there's a lot of questions I want to ask you about your near-death experience and how anyone possibly walks around the woods with a 500-pound lion, and you just sort of say these things off the cuff. We're going to have to return to them in a minute, so don't worry, listeners. I'm going to talk in more detail about this. But this is, I think, touching on something which I thought we'd perhaps get into later in this interview, which is that, or this conversation, which is that, because I work with animals too, I have noticed that animals like people rather have a sense of purpose and are usually actually very happy to marry that sense of purpose with your sense of purpose, provided you're listening to their likes, dislikes, sensory needs, going with the things that they enjoy, just like we would with people. And this idea of consent, working with animals comes up so much now. And of course, with domesticated animals that are not wild, they could go feral in some cases, but actually they've been hardwired to live with and deal with humans for thousands of years, the species that we tend to interact with. A lion might be rather different, actually, but certainly horses, dogs, that sort of thing, domestic animals. So I often find that the animals will seek out adventures with me. But as you say, I came from a mindset of you must be the boss, because that was just the culture we grew up in, to a mindset of walk with me, but in order to make you feel safe, let me play the leader here, because I do understand this monkey world and I can make it safe for you. If we were in horse world, I hope you would do the same for me, And then
Right.
I agree with you, just sort of having that attitude seems to make things go so much better. But I want to scale back. Okay, first question, how do you walk around the woods with a 500-pound lion? You can't just go walking around the woods with 500 pounds. I was in the woods this morning. I didn't see anyone walking around with 500-pound lions. So how does one even do that without getting at?
Well, that was the wonderful part about the industry, is that you had such a rapport. We would get the lion cubs when their eyes were closed and bottle raise them. And so you had a bond already. And there was just a regular routine of you'd put a chain collar leash on them and take them for walks so that they got exercise. So it was like working a horse or whatever. You would take them out and walk
But the
them
horse
to.
isn't naturally your predator. So would there not
No,
be a point at
no,
which the big cat goes, actually, you know what? I love you, but I am hungry.
yes, that there was always that. They were always a lion, and that dealing with the public not understanding that was a very hard part of the job, of the public saying, well, obviously it's a tame lion and you're with it, so I can walk up and pet it. And that was one of the huge energetic lessons that I got to learn from lions, was to be able to, my body began to be able to sense when their intent would change, because they would be walking along, da da da, hi, we're just buddies here. And suddenly their intention would go, you know what? You could be food. And my body would respond to that and feel it. And I'd go, don't go there. And they go, oh, okay, she knows. So,
Okay.
you know, so it taught me, wow, there is a physical response to intent. And I need to know more about that, because I
That's
want to
interesting.
take that. I want to take that back to horses, of what are they reading in my intentions that feels either safe or predatory to them. And so it was a wonderful learning experience for me, because I was lower on the food chain than a lion. And
And
my body needed to relearn how to read when their intention changed.
they just talk me through a safety protocol. When you go walking with a lion in the woods, are you doing that by yourself, or do you always have a second person or something like that? Are there some sort of chains of safety that you sort of need to abide by? So talk me through like the nuts and bolts. How do you go walk? What do you do to stay safe walking a lion through the woods?
There always was a buddy system. You
Okay.
you never were alone. So you always had to have at least two people with you.
So when you had this revelation and you were asking mentally, there were a couple of other humans around, but just not involved in that conversation.
Right. That conversation was all in my head.
Got it.
Which happens quite often.
I know all about that, I'm sure. And when you had this revelation with the lion, and the lion sort of became Aslan and looked at you in that way, were the other two people in any way aware of this, or was this purely between you and the cat?
No, no, the other two people, were just paying attention to the environment they're there as a safety net for is there anything any people coming, anything we have to watch out for. And for me, my entire attention is on paying attention to the lion.
Right, because you
And
can't
where,
let your attention
yeah.
wander if he
So
suddenly
so
decides
it's
you're
it's a practice in being very, very present.
interesting.
Yeah.
It must be, yeah.
Yeah. You had to be because the
Oh,
lion is waiting for you not to be.
right. Even if he likes you. It's
Yes.
like, yes, I'm sorry, it's not personal. I'm just, I just am a lion. Yeah. Yeah. But thanks for all the milk bottles that you gave me 5 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah.
And could be lunch.
So, okay. When you had this switch in your relationship then with the animals that you were working with on set, did this show outwardly in your training techniques? And then did that bring questions or challenges from the colleagues that you were working with? Or was it sort of invisible to them? Was it just like a private contract that was between sort of you and God and you and the animals in terms of intention? But outwardly, it sort of looked the same.
I I would think I don't like to disparage anyone or something. It's just it changes your level of where suddenly you start to question techniques and the habitual thinking, the habitual way of training, where you go, I'm not willing to do that anymore.
So
And
what did you stop doing? And did that bring resistance?
well, I stopped being of the hierarchy mindset of being forceful, of you have no say in doing what I'm asking you to do. And so it changed my training protocol to being more focused on setting up a situation where the animal wanted to participate rather than setting up a situation where if you don't do this, you don't get fed. And so
Right.
you'll do when you get hungry enough,
Okay.
that type of training. And it was so much more dependable in like on-set situation, because if an animal were scared or were hungry, they weren't going to do anything. And so if you were dependent on that to get a certain set of behaviors and the animal reached, well, I'm not hungry anymore, so I'm not going to do anything. You were done, and in Hollywood, they did train that way. And that's why they depended so much on so many lookalikes. We would have multiple animals to play one role. Because
Right. Oh, I see. Because
if
once
one animal said, I'm not working today, I'm not hungry,
got it.
you were screwed.
Okay. So you had to have 5 lines instead of 1 for the same scene.
Right.
Just okay.
For the
Okay.
same seed. But if you had a lion that was like, I have a relationship with you and I will do it to please you, then you were way ahead of the game.
Got it.
But for
Okay.
instance, I
Go ahead.
had the lion that I had this epiphany with, that I had a relationship with. There was one event on a set where he got really upset with another trainer and he was going to kill him. He went after him with the intent to take him out because he was irritated with this trainer. And I was able to jump in front of the lion and get eye contact with him and say, no, you may not do this. Stop. And he had two guys on lines on that, two big, huge muscle guys that he was just dragging along with him. They couldn't stop him. He was going to take the guy down. And I jumped in front of him. And because I had a relationship with him, I went, stop. You
Am I allowed to
cannot.
ask what movie that was? I know you don't want to just get into
Yeah, no.
that.
I really don't even remember. And it's funny because I do remember I was along on that. I was not even considered a trainer on that set because the hierarchy on the sets was so much, okay, we are working a big lion, therefore we must have big, huge men trainers.
Mm.
And so I volunteered to go along to help out because I had a rapport with this lion. But
And
I
what was the
wasn't,
lion being required to do in that scene?
well, he was just walking from one scene to another. They were just out walking him at that point. But he became so irritated with this trainer who kept teasing him, which why would you
So,
tease a lion?
right. So
Nobody
yeah, that was
teases.
my next question. What was going on with the teasing? How,
Yeah.
so describe to me what the trainer was doing.
Well, the trainer was actually going up and harassing him and
In what way though? Like poking him with a needle? Like
like
what?
grabbing his tail and coming up and like pretend biting him in the butt, with his hand, like just going and it
Why?
was who knows? It was very much, what the heck
Was
are
he
you
showing
doing?
off for somebody else or something?
I guess he just had an ego of I have no idea.
Because
I mean,
presumably this was a bloke who'd worked with lions before and knew that doing something like that might be unwise. What do you think went through his head that he thought, well, this would be a good idea to do this right now?
no idea because it was so like unethical, like, what are you doing?
Okay.
And can you not read that you are pissing this lion off? Why would
Uh-huh.
you want to do that? So yeah, it was just there were some trainers in the business who were so disconnected from reading the animal that it was like, what are you thinking?
Did trainers get taken out from time to time because of this?
Oh, yes, you hear about it all the time
I see.
of a trainer being attacked, and what happened? Well, this was one of those, this guy was gonna get eaten,
Okay.
so it was, and it would have been the lion's fault.
It's interesting you say that because, of course, you and I share the horse world, and I've owned and worked with a lot of stallions, which, as you know, can be aggressive and so on. So I can't imagine ever doing anything to sort of provoke that aggression because,
Right.
you might have to deal with it anyway at some point. So, I mean, the last thing you want to do is, have more of it when it's a 1,000-pound animal.
It's
But
got to be an ego thing because you had seen, I mean, in your probably work on sets and stuff, how sometimes on a horse, an actor will want to jack up the horse so that he's rearing and mouth
yeah,
open, and they think that looks cool. Like, look at this animal that I'm mastering
mm,
when, but I can't imagine like wanting to have a stallion get aggressive unless it just looked cool to
right. But
them.
and I could see someone's ego who was not uninformed doing that as an actor sitting on the horse, not knowing what he's dealing with, or an actor with a lion not knowing what he's dealing with. It's just interesting to me that a trainer, a professional, would do
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
but then again, go ahead.
Maybe even look how dangerous my job, to the film crew and stuff. Look at,
Mhm.
this is a dangerous animal I'm working with, and look at him roar, and
Mm.
this is a really dominant position that I'm in. So that's the only thing I think of.
What we would, on a full disclosure to the listeners, Terri and I were together recently on a retreat in Italy, and Terri, there's two stories you shared with me that I want you to share. with the listeners, if you would. One speaks to this business of when the cat's intent turns, and the other is when there was a second encounter with a lion that was perhaps even more, let's say, extreme. So the first one, you were walking with a leopard, I believe, and you said that thing about we have to be fully tuned in. Can you tell us what happened with that leopard? It has to do with
Um,
your art.
oh, um, gosh, Rupert, you're making me tell all these stories. They're never, they're
That's the
not,
idea.
yeah, not, yeah, but they're
We
not.
could
No,
exchange
they're,
recipes about strawberry flan, I suppose, but yes.
I guess they, are diving boards that get you to change something. But yes, this was it was what you were talking about is what is the process of going in and taking a leopard for a walk. Well, leopards are known for being amazingly fast. They can bounce off a wall and go over your head, and in the process of going over, bite you 5 times. I mean, they're amazingly fast. And this leopard, he was Keisho was his name, and I was hooking the chain around his neck and to take him out for a walk, but I didn't have backup right there. They hadn't come in the cage with me. I didn't normally you would carry like a box or stick or something to wrap them on the nose if they did bite down on you, because when they're cubs and you're training them not to bite down too hard, you take your fingers and across their nose, like, don't do that. Don't bite down on me. So I had stuck that stick in my mouth and was doing the chain up, and he caught eye contact with me like, you're defenseless. And just in that moment, he bit down, and he bit down seriously. And I was lucky enough to have multiple layers on. I had, 2 jackets on and a long sleeve shirt under that. So he I have a scar from it. It's not something that I'm proud of. It's not something that I show off. It's not a badge of honor. It's a badge of dishonor of I was not present and aware enough, and he was. And in that moment, he took full advantage of it. He's like, you screwed up.
How did that not end up with an escalation with you dead or severely mauled?
I think, again, because of the rapport, he wasn't, his intent was just in that moment of you screwed up, and now it's going to cost you. And then the backup came in, because there was another person there. They came in. He released my arm. So yeah, it could have been much worse, but there was another person there. So
Okay.
it's like I said, it happens so fast.
Yeah.
It just an instant, but in that instant, for me, time stops. It's like, and you see everything happening in slow motion of, I screwed up.
Did you have a particular rapport with leopards or with lions? Was there a particular animal that you had a particular rapport with? Species?
I Well, with that one lion I did, but I love tigers. Tigers seem the most social to me. Now, I know in the wild they say that they are solitary. I don't believe it, because they are so even more social than lions are, as far as wanting to play, wanting to bond, wanting to, be with someone, be in relationship. Leopards are very, very solitary. They would prefer to be left alone. They prefer a solitary lifestyle. But then I guess that's kind of like house cats. Some of them are very social, some of them are not, but the leopards tended to be solitary. The tigers were very, very social, loved to play. And the lions were social but lazier than a tiger. They love to just lay around, sunbathe and hang out, especially a big male lion.
Well, that brings me to the other story that I wanted to get you to talk about, which is, so you're at this point of trust. You've started to establish much more rapport with the animals, and there you are actually lying around with a lion, and something happens. And this story, when you told it to me, made a big impression on me. Can you take us through that? What happened that day? And again, what did you learn from that? And the follow-up process of your colleagues, etc.
Yeah. Well, that was a transitional point for me of it's time to get out of this business, because, and I don't like to go down the negative side of it, because, the lessons in my life has progressed as it should. But at that point, I was laying out with the lion, and he was laying across my lap.
Was this
And
the
we
same
were
lion that you
the
talked
same
about?
lion. Yeah, the same lion. And he was socially grooming me. How a dog sometimes will groom you as if you have fleas, with their teeth. This lion was doing that on my leg. He was socially grooming me. And the head trainer came from over the top of me with the wood dowel and smacked that lion across the nose for having his mouth on me. And so the lion thought that I had done it, because we were both kind of, just relaxed and hanging out together. He jumped up, and I'm still laying in the prone position on the ground underneath him. He jumped up and was furious with me for reprimanding him for being social. And that was kind of the tipping point for me of the lack of awareness in the humans around me is going to get me killed. So it's time to move on. And that it was such a hard choice, in that, leaving the industry, leaving the animals that I had relationships with. It was like, well, who's ever going to have a rapport with these animals again? Who's going to work with them? So it was hard to leave. I would, in the horse world, it would be like leaving a stable with horses that you worked with and knew well, because you didn't get along with management. So
What happened to persuade that lion that, as furious as he was, he just got whacked across the nose with a heavy wooden thing, where he was just trying to show you love? Why did he not kill you? What happened to prevent him from doing that?
Well, the head trainer was there to back him off. But the lion never. It destroyed our relationship.
That was what I was going to say. So the lion couldn't get over that. He couldn't say,
no.
Okay, that wasn't you.
He never trusted me again. He never, and that broke my heart. It was part of it's time to go. Because now I don't have this relationship anymore. It's just been destroyed. And so it goes back to being dangerous.
Right.
For me, because I didn't have the respect of the head trainers, because they didn't realize the value of a relationship. They were still in the old mindset of training. And
what year was that?
I would say it was probably early 2000s, like 2000.
Okay, so relatively recently. Would you say that training methods and approaches have changed radically since then? Or would you say it's still more or less as it was when you left?
I would venture to say, since I'm not involved in it, it's hard to tell. I would hope that there are different levels of people, just like in the horse world.
Mhm.
I would say it's probably still um, a trainer mindset
Mm.
because the horse world is just evolving. The dog world, I would think, is still pretty much, a trainer mindset. So I would assume that
No,
Hollywood was also, because it was so ego based. It was so, a
yeah.
director didn't even want to talk to a female trainer. They
No,
would, they,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, they would ask the actor how to get the animal to do something rather than asking me.
It's a really interesting point that because I, as you know, spent some years working on movie sets. When I was in college, I was mostly riding horses on them. And I remember being really, I don't know, shocked is not the word because I was at a military school, so I was used to military hierarchies. But I found it curious, I think, that there was this desire for hierarchy on movie sets that people seem to actively want to ape the military while not being military. And I'd worked in other creative environments, like in the theatre and in the opera, actually, a little bit as a boy. And although you do have to have a chain of command and things have to happen, and sure, you've got a lot of teams need to be organized and things must go right for the show. Yes, yes, yes. But there was much more of a sense of team play, I felt, in theatre and opera. And when I got on movie sets, it was like everyone was just an arsehole. But like really kind of enthusiastically putting effort into this arseholedom so that, and everyone was sort of busy dissing everybody else. So, we were effectively extras, even though we were special action extras because we were riding the horses in complex situations. And so we fell into this bit where they didn't have to pay us as much as they'd had to pay a stuntman, but they'd have to pay us more than, so special skills, right? So
You
we'd
were
be
classified as a stunt man, which had, some
special
ego to
action,
it.
they call us. Yeah. And so, if you see, okay, for the people listening who want to know about film scenes, okay, if you've ever seen the film Willow, this is actually typifies this mindset. That there's a fantasy film called Willow from the 80s, which a lot of people still follow in a bit of a cult way. When that film opens, there's a princess being chased through the woods, and she's being chased through the woods by two baddies in armor with these two death dogs, which are actually Rottweilers with latex suits on them, pursuing her through Epping Forest, which is just outside London. And one of those baddies was me. I'm in every riding scene in that movie. I was aged about 20, I think. And exactly as you say, the dogs had to be called by a trainer to run across this section of forest with us cantering behind them as if we were hunting. But of course, because of the latex suits that the dogs were wearing, they got a bit confused and we had to retake and retake. And then eventually, for some strange reason, one of the dogs turned and went the wrong way and ran under the horse's hooves of my co-baddie. And the dog wasn't actually hurt, not because he was also wearing a big piece of latex, but, it wasn't a good thing. And then immediately you had the dog handler who was like this big, shaven-headed, tattooed, sort of London, very aggressive. I have Rottweilers, yeah. And the horse master, who was this same equivalent, Greg Powell, huge dude, kept coming out of a sort of somewhat criminally associated family, as a lot of them do. All that money, lots of flash, lots of power. And they kind of went at it in front of us violently while we're just sitting on our horses waiting. And the directors, because they love this stuff. And then the director to the first assistant directs to the second assistant, they wouldn't talk to each other. And they'd be, so yeah. And there was sort of who you could sit next to and who you couldn't sit next to and you had to like demonstrate respect and you had to kiss ass. And it was really, really interesting to me.
There was a hierarchy of who you could talk to, right?
Indeed.
Who you could kiss. You had to do it in a hierarchy.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I'm not allowed to kiss your ass because you're actually too high for my lips, right? Got it. Yeah, I've got to.
You're not supposed to even talk to me.
Yes, your God. Yeah, it's bizarre. So I could see how that would filter down. I didn't work around exotics, so all my things were just basically based around horses. You might occasionally see someone over there with an elephant or something, but generally there wouldn't be much. You know how it is. There wouldn't be much communication on a movie set. You go, you do your job, and you leave. So, but what's interesting to me is that this world that we're trying to create art and wonder, right? That's what a movie is. We're trying to create a journey into the imagination and often a journey through the heart and something inspirational. But in fact, they're often being produced by people who are being so actively unpleasant to each other. Yeah, so enthusiastically unpleasant to each other. That it's interesting that that doesn't come across more, in like, so, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
what I found really interesting was that it it did come through, like, if working a dog, for instance, if the dog did not like the actor because they were an asshole, that that does come through on camera. You
Okay.
know, makes our job much harder in that we were supposed to make it look like these were best friends. And it was extremely obvious, from the body language of the dog. I don't want to be anywhere near this person because they're radiating, ego. And that made it difficult to work animals with, because it did come across through the camera, I think, as far as the dog's feelings towards the person or whatever.
That's funny.
That
I
made
guess
the job a lot harder.
so they just had to keep retaking till they got the things that looked somewhat usable.
Somewhat usable, yes. And it did. It made it much tougher. So
So, okay, right at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about near-death experience. So it sounds like you were sort of trucking along in the normal trainer mindset, because after all, that's the culture. We all start from somewhere. And then what really changed for you before these incidents, with the two incidents of the lion and the leopard and so forth, was these near-death experiences tied up around aneurysms in your daughter. Can you please talk a little bit more about that? Because again, a lot of listeners, I think, will have had similar experiences. What happened to you, and what did you experience during that, perhaps more than one near-death experience that seems to have kicked you into another sphere?
yeah, my daughter was born in '87, and so I started to have difficulty. I started going through strokes, aneurysms prior to, and so there never really was a point where, I was in the hospital, the doctor said, "Oh, you flatlined," or anything like that. But I had the experience of leaving this planet, going to a very, very bright portal, and standing and almost looking through this portal, and there were beings behind me, so my guides, and all I remember hearing was, "Do you feel complete?" And I said, "No, I just had a daughter. I've got to go back and be her mom and everything." And it was pretty much that brief of boom, I was back in my body. But the realization of how much choice we have in our lives of directing our own experience, because that question being posed of, it's up to you of whether you want to cross over or go back. And it was like, oh no, I'm not done yet. I'm not ready to. And so it was okay. And that was huge to me, of understanding that we have a lot of choice in designing our own lives, in picking the path that we take. So when I came back, it almost felt as if I had a foot in both planes for quite a while. And for the seeking part of okay, who's going to teach me how to navigate this and how to make the right choices and how to live the rest of my life? Now knowing that there is an afterlife and that we are here to accomplish something. What am I here to accomplish? Other than the simple answer was, you said you wanted to be your mother's daughter. I mean, your daughter's mother. So, would it be okay if that was it? If that was, but learning how to be a mentor and if we go back to the conversation of learning from the lion about intention and how to feel that, the journey really takes me, if you want to go now to the future, I mean, me now, my quest now in life, my driving force is a lot of our beliefs are what have shut us down as far as our spiritual connections. I think intuition and being connected to different levels of consciousness is hardwired into us. And if you take the belief, if the scientific premise of our electrons can operate either as waves or as particles,
Yeah.
I believe humans' senses operate in the same way, where if you believe that you're separate and when everything changed to separate state and church and to separate, we are not part of nature and we're separate, we're separate, we're separate. That belief system shut down every part of our senses that operates on the wavelength. And that's intuition, that's spirituality, so if you're operating just on a physical realm of getting information from just what is physically measurable, we've shut down 2/3 of our ability to receive information. And when you start going down this rabbit hole of connecting with animals, it took me to connecting to myself, being present, being aware of my internal world and how my mind affected my body language, my energy fields. So then the fascination with biofields and communicating with animals non-verbally, non-physically. And then that will take you to the connection of, once you start feeling that connection with animals and biofields, their awareness of you being connected is right there. So it's like, oh, wow, not only do we have the capacity to be aware of this, but animals are already there. When you get there, it's kind of like oh, hello, here you are, finally. Now you're part of this environmental sphere of awareness. And that's a completely different level of consciousness that we have access to that kind of information then. And from there, it goes to planetary consciousness. From planetary consciousness, it goes to universal and cosmos, and then the super, the field, the 0 point field. So there are layers of awareness and consciousness that we've just shut down through our belief system. Now that was a huge rant. I'm sorry. But
Well,
that's where this journey has taken me, and it's all because of the animals.
now, okay, I want to go to where you went to after leaving Hollywood and how that's brought you to that conscious universe. I wouldn't say idea, because I don't think it's an idea. I think it's a reality. And I'll go into that in the book, but say realization. But I just want to go back to when you had the aneurysm. Did you know you were having an aneurysm? Like when it happened to you, like, oh my gosh, this is an aneurysm. And what did it feel like?
Yeah, I wouldn't say at that point I knew it was an aneurysm. I knew that it was a stroke of some kind. I actually, and this is
What happened? What were you doing? And what did it physically
so
feel like?
actually it happened when I was 18 years old. It happened. I was at college one day and I lost half of my vision and my ability to speak and everything. And I thought, whoa, what somebody put something in my coffee or something. What is going on? And then it cleared up. And being 18, it was like, well, that was weird. But the
Cleared up within
intuition
hours, cleared up within days.
within hours, it cleared up. And then later that night, I had a horrific headache. But then by the next day, everything was gone.
Okay.
So nothing ever happened of that other than a few years later, I was reading a book and it happened to be a Sidney Sheldon book. And it talked about a girl having an aneurysm in the story. And I went, wow, that's what happened to me. This sounds really familiar. And then in the story, she had difficulty during childbirth and had another aneurysm because of the hormones and stuff. And I went, wow, I better investigate this. I may have difficulty during childbirth. So I started investigating hormonal differences and imbalances and aneurysms and things like that. And I went in, when I got pregnant, I went in arguing with my doctors, I'm going to have some problems because I've had this history. And it was a fight. They were like, no, you're fine. You're just scared. You're just being silly. And I fought because my intuition was like, no, this is real. I'm going to have problems and I need to have a C-section. So I fought for that. And finally, the doctors went in and did CAT scans and stuff. And they said, by golly, you do have some scar tissue there. You did have some kind of episode, but you'll be fine. We're not worried about it. I said, I'm worried about it. So I fought again and I did have a scheduled C-section, but I started having aneurysm prior to that. So I had to go in and my daughter was taken a month early. But
And
if
these aneurysms cause blackouts. They cause you fainted and fell over. What happened?
Because of the location was in the left side of my brain, so the right side of my body would go numb. I would lose feeling in the right side of my body. I would lose the ability to speak. I would lose, cognitive abilities, but mostly speech and the right side of my body, which
And then did each time it cleared up sort of within hours, or did they take gradually longer and longer to clear up?
Well, at one point, and this was when I was 8 months pregnant, at one point I started having these symptoms and I'm trying to communicate to my husband, I'm in distress. I'm having some problems. And so he called the doctors that obviously I had been arguing with and had gotten on board as far as I'm going to have some problems. And they said, get her in here right now. Get her into the hospital. We've got to take the baby right now. She's having a stroke. The fact now that there was no, they say I should have paralysis. I should have had long-term effects from this. But
Why do you think you didn't?
My near-death experience, my choice.
Okay. And have you had an aneurysm since?
No.
So interesting.
But I haven't had, I decided one child was all I was have.
Right. What are the hormonal imbalances that bring on the aneurysms? I didn't know that there was a connection between hormones and that.
back then in whatever that was, the 80s or whatever, when they would put someone on the pill or on estrogen patches, they were one size fits all. And it was way too strong for me and caused hormonal imbalances
So
or
estrogen, too much estrogen can lead to
aneurysm.
aneurysms?
Yes.
I did not know that.
See, and maybe doctors would not agree. It was amazing to me how much I had to argue on my own behalf. And then after I went through it all, the nurse in the elevator said, "I'm so glad that you stuck to your guns because my job is to take care of the infants when the mother dies on the table." And I went,
Whoa.
"What?" I said, "You mean this happens often?" She goes, "You have no idea." And I said, "Then why did I have to fight so hard?" And she said, "Well, it's still a male dominated field and we don't know anything about hormones."
Do you think there's lots of women out there who suffered aneurysms because of going on the pill?
Yes, I do. I think it's a big thing.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I knew
Yeah.
about other risks, cancer risks and so on. It's so interesting that something which was in some ways a great tool for feminism, because it also was, it did liberate a couple of generations of women to go out into the workplace and get out from under at least accidental pregnancies and so on. So it was, of course, hailed as a liberating force, the pill. But I did not, and then of course now we subsequently realized that there were risks with cancer and so forth, but I didn't realize that there was a similar risk with, is the overproduction of estrogen linked with weakening of general vein or blood vessel walls, or only in the brain?
I don't know if, the question is, was there a weakness there to start with that the hormonal fluctuations, caused an imbalance? Because I struggled, in puberty, I struggled through massive cramps and so I was hormonally out of whack anyway. So was there weakness there to start with? Was I just hormonally imbalanced? It would be interesting to know, what were my readings, what were my levels back as a teenager, what are they now? Uh, but the fact that a lot of women going through childbirth, they with the spikes in estrogen, because when I started having the seizures or whatever was because at the end of pregnancy, your hormones spike,
Mm.
you know. So consequently, I was like, wow, I'm going to have difficulty going through menopause. So I went on bioidentical hormones.
Okay. And
Yeah.
but that has
Just
not
just
created an
my
imbalance.
own intuition saying I need to keep myself at a certain level
Okay.
because I also obviously have issues, vein weaknesses or whatever to large hormonal spikes. So
And what's really interesting, I didn't realize that there is a vein weakness hormonal spike connection. And like, what is that? Is that causing just, I'm wondering aloud here, is it causing weaknesses in the stem cells that then become the cells of the blood vessel wall? So they arrive weakened because of some hormonal imbalance. Is it that? So I'm going to go off and do some research because,
yeah. Well,
yeah, this
what
is
was interesting is after the whole childbirth, I had a neurosurgeon came in and I just had my daughter and my near death experience and everything. And he came in and he says, "You have a tumor in your brain. We have you scheduled for surgery for tomorrow." And I went, "No." no, it's not a tumor. Because I knew. I mean, I had already been fighting for this. I'm going to have, and that I had this earlier episode. And he was so furious with me for refusing to do the surgery. He was just beside himself. Like, you can't say no. It's like, oh, yes, I can. I'm walking out of this hospital because I know that if you go in for surgery, I'm not walking out of this hospital. And he said, yeah, well, it's very likely. You probably won't be able to talk. You probably won't have use of your right side, but that's okay. We'll save your life. And I said, no, no, you're not. I'm going home. So, and then later, the neurologist said, I could lose my job for telling you that you're right. You have the ability to wait and watch this and monitor it. If it goes down, it was blood leakage. If it gets larger, it's a tumor. So we can wait and see. And it ended up, dissipating. So
Why would he lose his job
my
for
intuition is
giving you a life-saving professional opinion?
because because of that hierarchy.
Again, it comes down to hierarchies, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
that the surgeon was above him, and they are not allowed to have any other opinion than the hierarchy's opinion.
So interesting, the hierarchies on the movie sets, the hierarchies in the hospitals. Yeah.
And Rupert, you can't release this podcast because we're going to get viral.
Well, we're not naming names. We're just recounting, vague anecdotal experiences. I don't think any hospital has been named here. But all right. So look, you fight to be heard, and then you do get a handle on what's going on with you hormonally, but then you have the spike with your daughter. So that brings you to a near-death experience that then brings you into a much greater relationship with the animals, which of course makes you a better professional, until there you are with the lion who's grooming you, which I must say, if I saw someone with a lion nuzzling on someone with their teeth, I of course wouldn't be able to interpret that. But I suppose you'd watch for a while and say, well, is that lion drawing blood or not? So clearly you were in a relationship with this lion, and then someone comes along again in the hierarchy of your animal trainers and messes that up. And now you decide to leave Hollywood. What do you then go off and do?
Well, we ended up, my husband racing by then was suffering in Southern California. So we would transition from Sacramento, which was my hometown, to Los Angeles. We would come up here every summer. Well, the racing ended up Sacramento. Ended up having more dates up here than in Los Angeles. So we moved to the foothill area of Sacramento. So we moved out of LA.
And what did you do? Okay, he's still professionally in your racing, but what are you doing?
I tried to, because my brother David, who you've met, had the advertising agency. I tried to do film work in Sacramento area. It didn't compare to the industry in Los Angeles. The money wasn't there. The education wasn't there of what was required to train an animal. So I went back and forth with that for a while, and then in the process would do private training for horse lessons and for people with problem horses, problem dogs. So I became a specialist as a problem solver.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what I learned through that was, wow, it's the people who need the education. It's the people who need to change. Mm. And people don't necessarily want to hear that. It's like, your dog is not a problem. You are. Yeah. It's like, okay, how do you navigate that? Because I loved the whole thing with the Hollywood industry was I loved working one-on-one with animals without having to deal with the general public. In private training, it was, okay, somehow I need to educate this person. So I need to become a person trainer as much as an animal trainer. And through working with animals and through communicating to the people, this animal is not a problem. There's a behavior that you don't like. So there's a behavior that's a problem, but the animal is a good animal. And I thought, wow, I would love to have that mindset with people. I want to view people with the same open heart that I view animals. How do I do that? And so I went into a coaching program. And it was another spiritual elevation for me of viewing people in the same way that I viewed animals. You know, there may be behaviors that this person is projecting or whatever that are serving me in some way, but the person is a good person. They have qualities that I love and appreciate. And so after the coaching program, I learned to love people as much as I loved animals. And so again, my work evolved because now I could mentor and coach people along with their animals. So it evolved into almost like a marriage counselor or a relationship counselor between the animal and their person. And it was what you need to change in you in order to make this work for this animal.
Now, the human ego makes that a tricky process.
Yes.
How did you find yourself able to get people to open up to this kind of approach? Because it makes them look at themselves too.
That's a gift I think that the animals bring because people are willing to change for their animals.
You know, you're right. They are. It's true. They're more willing to change for their animals than they are for other people. It's so true.
Yeah. And I take that to myself.
I would take that to myself too. I'm probably more likely to change.
Like
Yeah.
people. and people, so, working with horse people or what, they would do whatever it took. And I did end up being a last resort. You are my last resort because this horse is going to have to be put down or this dog is going to, be put down or whatever. You are my last resort. And so their last resort is I'm willing to do anything. What do I need to do? And then they were in the right mindset to change themselves.
So interesting. So can you give us a couple of examples of some really fundamental, like changes that you saw someone put themselves through in order to get better with their animal?
Well, I think
that for us.
The most fundamental change for most people is their focus on and this dives into the self-awareness of what do you want? What is it that you want to happen? Because for a while, I couldn't figure out why I would do something and then the person watching me would imitate me and the animal would look at me like, what? What did they just say? And I said, what's the difference? And the difference was my mental imagery was on what I wanted to happen. Like if a person was struggling with a horse and I go, stop, what is it that you want? And they'd go, I just want this horse to stop pulling on me. I want it to stop throwing its head. It's like, no, that's what you don't want. What is it that you want? And they'd go, they would have trouble coming up with it. The pictures mentally. What does it look like? What are you asking? And they go, I just want my horse to drop his head. I want him to relax. And the horse would sigh and do it immediately. Like, why didn't you tell me? And the person's face would just go, oh my God, did I just do that? And you go, well, what do you think? So teaching a person to visualize and focus on what it was that they wanted to happen was huge to the animal, because the animal would respond to it immediately. And that was a huge aha moment for the person to go, oh, what am I normally picturing? What am I normally focused on? And they 90% of the time are focused on the problem and how to fix it,
Mm-hmm.
which is a completely different mindset and energy than the solution and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go
Yeah.
to the solution and what that looks like, the animal goes, oh, very clear, done, right there with you.
A lot of people who are listening to this are dog owners, not just horsey people.
Mhm.
I'm intrigued by because horses people tend to own and ride and then go away. But a dog you live with 24/7. What can you give us an example of a fundamental personality change that you saw someone allow themselves to go through on behalf of a dog?
Well, again, for instance, the timing and the pictures of focusing on the problem. For instance, my dog won't come to me, and the person is going,
Yes.
so that I can hit you because I'm so scared and I'm so mad that you are running away from me. Don't run across that street. Don't run away. Don't is what they're picturing. And their entire energy gets aggressive and scared because of all of the things that they're picturing happening. Rather than them picturing, come over here so that I can hug you because I love being with you. That's completely different energy than, you know, because
Have you
I need
seen
to
someone
control you.
actually able to put that anger and fear down in that moment? Or is it
Yeah.
more you coach them
With,
to that
with,
point? Because
with,
when
with,
somebody's flooded with cortisol, they usually can't change what they're doing in that moment, right?
no, but they can be coached through it. Try this instead.
Mm.
What are you picturing? So it goes into this self-evaluation. That's why for me, the self-awareness is such a big piece. And from Candace Carradine and the Heart Math Institute, now we know all about the coherency between what the heart wants and what the brain is worrying about, right? That when the brain is focused on all the negative things that could happen and the fear, your entire nervous system changes, your entire energy changes, your chemistry changes. The animals are aware of all of that, and it confuses them because it's chaotic.
Mm.
It's not coherent. So the messages are very confusing and chaotic because the animal is receiving the information in an energetic way.
That makes sense. Emotional, i.e. energetic, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So now you've moved to coaching human animal partnerships privately there in Sacramento. Where does it go from there?
From there, it just keeps going farther down because I get to learn as much. So I'm continually a student, which I love. I get to learn as much from every different scenario and every different aha moment that people have because the animals are just so responsive to it. It takes me to what's that about? What is it that they're picking up on? So it went to I love now doing self-empowerment retreats because, like I said, I've gone to the place of, wow, animals are teaching me that intuition and channeling and information comes through these fields of awareness. And we have the capacity to environmentally be of this earth rather than on this earth. So this new fascination with people wanting to re-engage with nature
Mm.
is a perfect fit for me. It fascinates me that people are starting to realize we've become so disconnected, so in our heads, that it's a health hazard to us and to the planet. That how do we get back in sync? So that the whole study of entanglement and, where science is going is just absolutely fascinating to me. And to get to play with that with animals as co-teachers in a retreat setting, what could be better?
Okay, so talk me through it. If I come on one of your retreats, if one of the listeners comes on your retreats, and by the way, listeners, I would encourage you to, because I was on a retreat with Terri in Italy and it couldn't have been more delightful. I'm going to go into some of the revelations that you brought through in a moment. But what would you do when somebody arrives and says, yes, Terri, I would like to have this experience with you where you can now begin to connect me to more this meta field beyond just an individual animal, to animals, to nature itself, to, as you, oh, I'm looking at a fox going past my window
Uh,
in the middle of London.
wow.
Hello. Yes, yes, yes.
See,
Okay.
we kind of lights you up. Why does that light you up, Rupert?
It's nature right there. And the two wood pigeons that were down in the garden. Oh, and now the fox has gone up on the roof under
Yeah.
the statue of my mother's studio. How wonderful. A quick aside. I'm in London right now. I live normally in Germany, but I'm in London right now because my mother's gone in for a back operation. So I'm here sort of in backup. And her studio, I'm watching the fox go up the roof. Her studio has in the middle of London, it's really middle, has a family of foxes living behind it. He was taken to come up on the roof, and I've been waking up every morning, sleeping in the studio, to the foxes scrabbling on the skylight, because I think it's warm up there, and then playing with each other. There's a whole family of them, and they're playing on the
Oh,
skylight. And I've been taking
got
pictures of them from underneath. They have no idea that I'm there.
they
It's
have
like
no
being,
idea you're there. How
it's
fun is that?
extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
Yes.
So Terri, when one of us wants to come on a retreat with you, are you pairing us up with animals that you've got, or are you working with animals on a sort of more symbolic way? Well, how's a retreat work? What do you do? What do you show us?
So a lot of times it has been horsewomen, and I don't relegate it to women. It just seems like, horse functions seem to be 90% women. So a lot of times it's women that come with their horses that want to form a deeper connection with their horse. But we do it through the horses facilitating play, and a lot of that happens because this is the first initiation that people have to their mindset actually affecting their field of energy. So we talk about, the fields of energy. Well, a retreat situation is really reconnecting with nature. So there's interaction with animals, be it horses or just out in nature itself. I love to go places like Yellowstone, in the United States, where there's a lot of wildlife. So it can be just sitting out and observing and journaling in wildlife. It's drumming, some journey work. So teaching people how to journey and get answers from their own intuition and guidance. A lot of variety. I kind of design the retreat according to the group that I'm putting it together for, whether it be horse people or women's empowerment or leadership retreats. So what do you want to do, Rupert? What are we doing at Castle Leslie? That's what I want to know.
Well, I'm gonna talk to. Okay, yes, and actually, okay. So listeners, Terri and I are going to be doing some retreats together. And Castle Leslie is an amazing place in Ireland. And if you have listened to Sammy Leslie's podcast here on Live Free, Ride Free, she's the person who owns, runs and conceived Castle Leslie, which is an extraordinary place in Ireland. It's like going to Narnia. Please do join us on one of these. I'm going to talk a little bit about some things you told me when we were on the retreat in Italy, and that I found very intriguing, that I think listeners would as well. So if you remember, Terri, we were sitting talking and you were saying, you had been doing a lot with horses, and as you were getting further and further into looking through the lens of the heart, looking through the lens of the spirit, trying to be less of a particle, more of a wave, all of the things that you've been talking about, entanglement, that at a certain point you said you were starting to get messages from horses saying, we've been holding up the change, a lot of the change in sort of Western humanity for the last 30, 40 years. And we're getting to the point where our work may be done, and now other species are taking over. And I found that really intriguing, because I thought, well, yes, actually, in the sort of 40 years that I've been involved in the horse industry, I have seen that shift. It's not that you don't still have people who rigidly adhere to the old school, but more and more and more, even at the top of the sort of sport industry, one sees a softening, one sees, or at least more people moving that way, even if there's resistance than there ever was. And I think in the horse industry, things are actually quite positive. They're going in a positive way, let's say. So when you said that to me, it's like, well, yeah, I sort of have seen that parallel. And then you said to me, so now, I said, well, is anyone else speaking to you? And you said to me, yes, Rupert, the whale. And I registered my own reaction. And there were two Ruperts there. There was an older Rupert I'm quite old Rupert now anyway, so yeah, but an older Rupert I could recognize from a younger self, automatically putting on a little knee jerk there, going, oh, talking to the whales. Come on. And this is the Rupert who's gone, who works with shamans in the Kalahari, who's seen people shapeshift into leopard, and yet even with all that, there's still like this little vestige of the old school of which is basically just the people that raised me talking, and I observed that and I went, oh, if I'm having that reaction, that probably means there's something in what Terri's saying, because it must be challenging some old paradigm. And so therefore I should know what the new paradigm is. So then I was intrigued. So I said, well, do you remember I asked you, is that because I thought, let me just put all prejudice aside. Let me just ask the curious question here. So what I was curious is if whales are deciding now to come forward and help us, which would make sense on sort of the more planetary, the more global level, we are, after all, a planet of water. Is it because in the last 40 years we have stopped hunting them, basically? I mean, there's a couple of countries that do, but we've basically made a decision as a species to stop hunting that species, you could say. And have the whales noticed? And have they now, does that make them think we're ready for some sort of shift in consciousness? And where are they in consciousness? And where are they in relation to our consciousness? So could you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. And we'll take it back to, because the messages that the horses had completed their soul contract of helping humans evolve was coming from the whales, not from the horses. The horses are still that is their part of their contract with humanity, is to help evolve it, help raise its consciousness. And if I take it back to, for me, my intuition, what I've learned is that my intuition comes to me in a nonlinear way, meaning that a lot of times I'll start to receive the answer before I've even asked the question. And then when I go and I ask a question, I go, well, I must be just making that up because I already was thinking about that, a week ago or whatever. And now I recognize the pattern of answers start to come, and then I form the question, and the dots get connected. So the reason that I say that is when I say that the whales were calling to me, what now in my mind I relate a calling to, it's part of the answer starting to come through of now the whales want to teach us. I hadn't connected yet with whales. I didn't know that I was going to, but I kept getting this niggling in my mind of I need to be around whales. I need to connect with whales. They have something important to teach. So taking it back to that was the calling that I was having intuition wise of it's time for other species to step up. So then when I decided to start doing some channel writing of connecting with whale consciousness, it wasn't an individual whale or an individual group of whales. It was the collective conscious of whales saying horses have done their job in raising people's consciousness, that now they're asking the right question. And do you remember that I said earlier, when you start being aware of these fields of consciousness, the animals are already there, aware. That's why the whales are ready, because we've gotten to the place where the whales are going, oh, hello, here you are, finally.
A
Now
bit
we
like
can,
the lion when you look.
right,
Okay.
now
Yeah.
we can teach you because you just woke up. You just entered the room or this field of consciousness. You just entered it, and now we can have a conversation. That's how it feels to me as far as other species being ready to teach us. No, they've always been ready. We're now entering the room of that field of consciousness. And it's because our beliefs have gone there. Science is proving, these different fields of energy and these different connections are possible. So we're entering the room, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It does. What messages of note have come into you from the whales?
Well, a lot of the teachings were about vibration and frequency, how healing the planet and ourselves. And it was kind of, I believe it was Edward Casey said a long time ago, think of things in vibration and frequency.
That was Tesla, but
Test.
but Casey also, what Casey said was that rather like Jung, but Casey called it the Akashic record. Jung called it the collective consciousness, that there is this all human ideas, all experience that has ever existed or ever will exist, all exist sort of simultaneously in this quantum field, and you can access it if you want to intentionally, sort of thing. That,
Right.
yeah. And of course, just while you're saying that, you talked about frequency and vibration. What are whales but things that exist by frequency and vibration? Yeah.
Right. And the information coming through was about the Akashic records, so to speak, for the planetary consciousness, that the water contains memory.
Right. Yes. Liquid
And
intelligence.
they are able to access that information. So they were saying humans are concerned right now with losing their elders and with losing indigenous cultures. We're still here. We have access to the water. We have access to the records of the planet. And that's how we navigate. Because I was like, why do whales sing? And they were saying, we are singing our stories into the water. We are sharing our navigational routes, our histories, our stories, our culture into the water. And they said, think of it like the rock paintings for indigenous cultures. or the storytelling tools. This week, the water is our tool. And so there was all information like that was like, oh, wow. Now, when I get information like that, it's like, okay, go research that and find out more. And it takes me down these, rabbit holes of, oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Yeah, water has memory. And we talked about that on the retreat a little bit, of imbuing the water with your intentions and changing the structure of it. Well, they're saying that we have the capacity to do that, to clean up water pollution, is just do it vibrationally. And then there's, it's just it's fascinating. And then there's the elephants are coming forward now, and we could teach how to do that with the earth. The earth also has the capacity to retain memories.
Right, that was going to be my next question, because, for example, when I'm hanging with the Bushmen, the Sun Bushmen in the Kalahari, they'll always say the earth is us, the earth is our ancestors, our bones, our dust becomes the earth. We are. So that was going to be my next question. Okay, so elephants, earth, talk to us about that.
Well, I haven't gone there yet. I haven't been with elephants yet, but that's the message coming through, is that there's something about vibration and frequency and how they receive it through their feet, how they know because there was a documentary that was narrated by Morgan Freeman that talked about a rescue that would release elephants back into the wild. And they couldn't figure out how the elephants from prior years would always show up wherever they were going to do the release, even though it was a different time of year and hundreds of miles away. The elephants that they had already released would show up there. And they were going, how do they know this? Where we're going to be, when we're going to be there. And I always found that fascinating, that there's some form of knowing or communication that the elephants have with the intention of the humans that raised them.
It's very interesting. We know that whales sing, speak, communicate, vast distances through vibrations and frequencies, some of which we can hear and some of which we cannot. And of course, elephants do the same. They often communicate at very low frequencies that the human ear can't pick up, but the instruments can. And I find it fascinating that we're now at a point in human culture where we can accept through instrumentation that there are many, many planes, even in our own physical plane, that we cannot perceive, like infrared, like ultraviolet, like higher frequencies or lower frequencies, that we now can accept, whereas perhaps 100 years ago or 50 years ago, when we'd have said no. And if it's, if I can't see it with my eyes and hear it with my ears, it's not there. And now we know that that is just not true. Even though, of course, we'd had the telephone, we'd had electricity, we'd had all these things that we actually couldn't explain, couldn't see, but knew were there. But we say, well, I can sort of see electricity because I flick the light on. But no, that's not electricity. That's light created by electricity. We still can't see what electricity is. Oh, I can see lightning. Yeah, but that's still not electricity. That's electrical energy creating a visual form of something else. But what is electricity itself? We still don't know. And with these conversations like this with you give me a lot of hope, because really what this begins to sound like is the sort of conversation that I might have in the Kalahari with one of my teachers who was a healer, was a shaman, deeply involved in walking the line between physical world and the non-physical world and the animal world and the human world, and having to do that because your very survival is based on it. What I'm wondering, as you are telling me these things, is, does it all come down to empathy?
No, I'm not sure. Say more about that. I'm not sure I understand the question.
So empathy and sympathy are two different things. Like, so let's say, I don't know, you stub your toe on the door and like, oh, Terri, you're right. That's sympathy. But if I have stubbed my toe pretty recently, and you stub your toe. So I'm in your shoes. I can feel what you need. And I'm like, oh, Terri, do you need this? Because I can feel what you need. That's a very banal example. But so empathy between humans, say, is walk a mile in that person's shoes. Well, you can't, but you can with your imagination project it there. And then that suddenly opens your heart. And that suddenly opens your heart to compassion. You were talking about heart coherence. And what it will certainly do is dissolve conflict. What it will certainly do is reach a better outcome than if you didn't do that. It will open up channels of communication. It will repair relationships. It will avoid war, for example. But we find it hard enough to do that between our fellow human. When we go trans-species, however, I think very interesting things happen. And I guess I'm feeling that if we are basically a hunter-gatherer, highly intelligent ape who evolved at the margin of land and water, because that's our history of about the last 300,000 years. Therefore, we're sort of amphibious. Therefore, the relationship with the water is very important for us. And it can be positive or negative depending on what we imbue it with, because that's liquid intelligence, like our cerebral spinal fluid and our blood is all part of that. The liquid in our cells is all part of that same water that's on the planet. And then if we begin to bring that empathy to other species, a horse, a dog, a lion, a whale, a rock, a stone, a star, are we a fungus? Are we then all of those things at once? Because we are all those things at once, right? We're mammals. We have fungus in our bodies. We're all composed of stardust. We're all composed of liquid. Once we start behaving that way, thinking that way, feeling that way, whether we come in because we want a better relationship with our horse or better relationship with our spouse or better relationship with ourselves or our dog, is it a question that as soon as we take that step into this sort of greater empathy, then what we're actually doing is we're dancing with God? And as soon as we do that, is that the great mystery? Is that when life becomes magical, beautiful, wondrous, all the things that we know life actually sort of is behind the veil of all the shit? And it's just like we're trying to touch it. And back to the movie industry, it's so interesting. The movie industry almost exists to kind of try to help us connect with this world of the imagination and this world of inspiration and this world of, but hierarchies and other things can get in the way of that. But nonetheless, the aspiration is there for a sort of altered state, out of body experience of sort of having the story take you, sitting in the dark with the big screen in front of you, whoosh, you're into the story. But
Yeah,
it's a bigger story, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. When you say the word empathy, for me, it still comes from a mindset of division, of there's me and there's you. I can feel you because I can relate to you. So there's me and there's you. So it's still a separation mindset. And then we're talking about the particle of when I can feel it, experience it, touch it, measure it, then it's real. And that's a slow and dense way of receiving information. When our beliefs change, as they are starting to change now, because science is going there and proving it, of that everything is made of energy. And so when you start thinking in a mindset of my body is an instrument of receiving energetic information from fields of information, that's the levels of consciousness that you're talking about, of being able to know what an animal is thinking, or being in an environment, and like you talk about the hunters and gatherers, where they become part of the environment and they know where everything is, they know what it's thinking, they become part of that field of information. That what stops us from being able to do that is our beliefs that it is in any way different. Cultures that have been brought up in that way have that ability to do that. And they think we're abnormal. What do you mean you can't talk to the stars? What do you mean you don't hear the tree standing over there and what it has to say? It's just, they don't have to get through that belief of, well, I'm human and therefore I'm special, and that tree is just a tree. It
It's
doesn't
so
have,
interesting. Yeah. Because we didn't start that way as humans,
no.
and we are connected, of course, whether we believe it or not. I mean, here we are, we're not anywhere else. And,
Yeah.
and
No, there are different fields of connection.
yeah,
There's your internal field, your external biofield,
mm,
your your field that you have with other people, with those you're connected to. You have a group field. So we're just starting to get interested in working with the horses and working with the animals. We're getting interested in, what is this group field thing? How do birds fly and not crash into each other? How do they know? And people are starting to have those experiences where they go, wow, this is a real thing, a group
right.
field.
And I think we have that all the time, even without noticing it. For example, I was at an equine conference last year where somebody was saying, "Oh, and animals can do that thing, like birds in murmurations, or horses all running together and not bashing into each other, and it's because they're more connected and we're not." And I was thinking, is that? And then they showed pictures of people in crowds sort of falling over each other. But I was like, I don't know. I've seen horses bash into each other, and I've seen, I'm sure birds do it sometimes too. But actually, humans do it all the time, and we do it under really extreme situations. So, for example, I'm in London as we do this thing, and I just came back here on the subway from visiting my mother in the ward where she's had her back op. And, you're dealing with thousands and thousands of people in a busy station in London, all moving through a narrow space, all a little bit in their stress brain. And really, they ought to be bashing into each other all the time. But no, they're not. They all dancing elegantly in and around each other as if by water, half of them with their headphones on, not even looking at each other, and absolutely aware. And no one's being pushed off into the, train tracks, and no one, it's actually a miracle. And fights aren't breaking out between people, and people aren't tripping up. And there's this old person who's vulnerable, and everyone's just sort of flowing around that person. And I was looking at it going, we are so connected. And it's only when we bring thought to our disconnection, weirdly, that we disconnect. But as soon as we aren't thinking that, we go straight back to connection.
Well,
But I
see, and that
think we're just not conscious of it. Yeah.
especially Western, it's really been taught. And that's why it's so fascinating to work with kids as far as intuition and stuff before it's been pulled out of them. We've been taught we're that's not real, and we're separate, and take care of yourself, and there's not enough to go around, so we have to compete for it. All of those are learned behaviors. If we were able to keep kids in their intuitive, creative, mindset from early on, what a different planet it would be.
Well, it's interesting where the conversation evolved to in a little bit further back was the problems with being with hierarchies. And hierarchies are scarcity mentality. scarcity mentality comes directly out of agriculture. And all of the warrior traditions, all of the breakdown in the equality between the sexes, all of the separation from the divine, epidemics, organized religion, it all starts about 10,000 years ago with agriculture. Before that, you do not see war depicted on cave paintings. You do not see human atrocities depicted. Like, you do not have lone warrior stories. No. Completely different way of thinking. And luckily, those people are still here, alive and well on the planet. We've pushed them into very, very, difficult retreats. But my philosophy is, I do feel, and I think it's conversations like this prove it, that we coming out of that post-agricultural, post-modern, post-industrial thing are returning to the hunter-gatherer sets of ethics in terms of how we relate to each other, how we relate to the planet. The idea of care, the idea of compassion, the idea of love, really, which frequency, stewardship, while at the same time now having at our disposal these tools, these technological tools, which we've earned through a rather unpleasant process. Can we turn those technological tools to the right thing? Time will tell, but I do feel that there's a will there, a growing will there, that I think someone like you, having witnessed your relationship with animals and the way people change their relationship with animals, and therefore to themselves and therefore to the wider environment, both on this planet and beyond, I think that's to some degree proven. I think that your life is really sort of an illustration of that. Would you not agree? That I'm very optimistic, but call me naive, but I do feel it.
It's very exciting and fascinating to me of that. And it is, it's not gaining new tools. We're reawakening to what's already there. And that's the same thing of like you said, when you raise your consciousness or change your beliefs or start getting interested or curious about these different ways of receiving information or of being, the animals are right there. They're already there going, oh, yay. Oh, yay. Hi. Glad you came into the room. Glad you're here. So the whole message of, and the whales are waiting. That was what I burst out to Carrie Lake when I met her. And the whales are waiting, because that was the message that I was getting, is they were waiting for us to get to a certain conscious level to be able to even exchange information with us. So it's really encouraging that obviously we have, we're waking back up to remember a lot of these indigenous old ways of being or teachings that are now proven by science. And so now we're saying, oh, it's okay to believe that now, because now it can be proven.
Yeah, I think the advancements in quantum entanglement are changing everything. And now, yes, we could exist on multiple planes. Yes, you could be connected with someone at a vast distance. Yes. Because here we're observing electrons doing just that, being waves until we observe them, and then they become particles, and then we look away and they become waves again. We're seeing this. I agree.
And if you take it back to our original
conversations
of our original conversations of what's the biggest shift that I witness in people, it's a change of focus for communication with their animals to work. It's a change of their focus. It's the same on a planetary level of just, instead of a problem-solving mentality of what's wrong with the planet, what needs to be fixed, that we could change to a mindset of what frequency would be most valuable here, and things would change immediately. That's the message that I'm getting with the whales of if you think in terms of vibration and frequency, it could happen instantaneously.
Okay.
That's encouraging.
It certainly is. And by the way, for those listening, that this is happening in the field of medicine. And I'm hoping to get a couple of people on the show who are practicing doctors and researchers who are beginning to look at how vibration and frequency can be used to do things very, very quickly that we don't think the thought hitherto cannot be done. And of course, what is that but shamanic healing? Scientifically proven. It's so interesting, isn't it? It's just the original stuff. I guess the original stuff is always going to be the best stuff. And yeah, sometimes when people say, why have animals at all? Well, they connect us, right? They connect us to this stuff.
Well, it's again, those levels of consciousness and awareness of they're the same.
Yes.
As above, so below, it's like, so you say medicine is going here for us to be able to heal ourselves, well, and heal our relationships and heal the planet and heal the, to get to the place that you said of eventually co-creating with the divine.
So I think we should, all listeners, go on a retreat with Terri to co-create this relationship with divine. Terri, how do we reach you? How do we find you? How do we find out about you?
It would be my website is terrikuebler.com.
Can you spell that out for us, please?
TerryKuebler.com. And
so
that's
Terri with a Y and Kuebler with a UE. TerriKuebler.com.
Yes. And I'm in the process of developing like retreats and stuff now. So we'll be talking.
Okay. I can't wait. And yes, just for disclosure, listeners, we'll probably be doing them on the east side of the Atlantic, hopefully at a place called Castle Leslie, which is amazing in Ireland, and to be determined stateside. But watch this space. Terri, it's been an amazing conversation. Can we revisit this and come back and go a bit deeper next time?
Sure. Okay. I'd love to.
Then I think with that, we've given everyone something to chew on. Would you say go connect with your animals so that you can go connect with God, basically?
Basically. Or connect with yourself so you can connect with others, so you can connect with the environment, so you can connect with stuff. It's a chain, not a hierarchy.
There we go. Yes, not a hierarchy. Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Like the lion doesn't want to be in charge of you. The horse doesn't want to be in charge of you. They just want to coexist with you in the right way. Sometimes
or possibly have you for lunch.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will continue this. Continue to go deeper. It's been a real pleasure, Terri.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Join our website, newtrailslearning.com, to check out our online courses and live workshops in Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Athena. These evidence-based programs have helped children, veterans, and people dealing with trauma around the world. We also offer a horse training program and self-care program for riders on longridehome.com. These include easy-to-do online courses and tutorials that bring you and your horse joy. For an overview of all shows and programs, go to rupertisaacson.com. See you on the next show. And please remember to press subscribe and share.